Donald Trump is trying to make America's 250th birthday all about him. Part of that was branding his 80th birthday as part of that celebration. On Sunday, Trump handed over the White House to his friend, UFC CEO Dana White, to transform the South Lawn into a violent spectacle featuring bloody and bizarre cage matches, and prominently displayed members of the U.S. military who were required to meet specific fitness standards just to attend. Ruth Ben-Ghiat joins me now. She is a professor of history at NYU and the author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. Max Rose is still with us. You know, Ruth, it would feel like a fever dream if not for the fact that you had warned us that this type of spectacle was in fact possible.
Yeah, because President Trump is one of the most optics savvy and obsessed presidents we've ever had. He's a man who comes from reality TV. He's also someone who seems to believe in violence as a way of solving differences, dealing with transitions of power. And in fact, this is part of his administration where Secretary Hegseth said, and I always think about this, we negotiate with bombs. So we don't use diplomacy. We go straight to violence. We negotiate with bombs. And so this spectacle of violence is exactly in keeping with the values that this administration and this person seem to hold. In fact, sending a violent mob, inciting a violent mob on January 6th, emotionally retraining Americans since 2016 with his rally speeches, saying things like, the problem is we don't hurt each other anymore. There's a long record of those statements, and so this is actually fitting.
Well, let's talk about who else was in attendance, because there was Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Paramount CEO David Ellison, comedian Joe Rogan. It's one thing for Donald Trump to want to do this. It's for everybody else to gather around him in celebration.
Yeah, look, I actually think that when we consider what should be the consequences of this event, what should be the repercussions, the event is irrelevant to me.
Okay.
What matters is the fact that during the event or in the immediate aftermath of the event, they announced and are signing a deal with Iran that leaves the United States of America weaker than it has been this century. That there should be consequences for. You know, the White House and the presidency, there's always been an element of showmanship and theater associated with it. And the Democrats have at times, I think it's been a weakness of theirs, they have not necessarily paid enough attention to that. But on the part of the Democrats right now, it is our responsibility to not let this president use a UFC fight to distract us all from how we have a failed American leadership before our very eyes. How because of this president, terrorist proxies over the course of this next month will receive billions of dollars from Iran because of this deal. How Iran now has the ability to threaten other nations in the region, Israel, the UAE, the Saudis, and others, because of this president. I don't care about a UFC fight. I care that this is a failed commander-in-chief.
Let me tell you why I care then. I care because, one, while he was enjoying it on the lawn, the average American needed a subscription to Paramount Plus in order for them to watch and access the fight on grounds that their taxpayer dollars pay for. Two, I think he is trying to build the image of himself as being immortal, as being invincible. And I do believe that begins to seep into the American psyche. I think using the American military as props around him and behind him gives the sense, the way he always talks about it, not that they are our military, not that it is American citizens who choose to serve, but they are, in his own words, his military.
Yeah.
That has consequences.
Yeah, and bringing together what both of you said, there's a relation between the many failures of President Trump and his need to puff himself up, putting his name and his face everywhere and having everything revolve around him. And the more failures he has, as tariffs and all the other things that have happened, his polls, he's tanking in the polls, the more he feels panicked. And so, in fact, the Washington Post did an investigation about his last months of his speeches. What is he talking about the most? Well, guess what it is? His ballroom and his bunker. because strongmen live in fear. They know exactly when they're displeased, they've displeased people. And so they get very fixated on having safe spaces. And so, and they also become, though, at the same time, more grandiose out of panic. And so he's been remaking the White House in his own image. And so the ballroom is like his ego, where the donors can come and everybody loves him, praises him. And the bunker beneath, one might say the ballroom is an excuse for the bunker, which has been enhanced. And he's always talking about how safe it will be, the military hospital, because he's worried. And so it's about his ego and his self-preservation.
What do you make of the fact that he wanted troops there?
You know, that was the element to this that I found the most disrespectful. Because, not just because of the singular incident, because you obviously think about all of the other things these service members could be doing at that moment. They could be with their family, they could be preparing to keep our nation safe, but also because of the myriad of ways that this administration has disrespected service members for the past previous years. They started off the administration firing veterans during DOGE, 50% of our workforce. They went on to do a total flip-flop on their opposition to forever wars and wage forever wars globally, resulting in the death of service members, all the while maintaining this caricature of the military. This caricature that, the military, the second that you salute it and parade yourself around service members, somehow you're strong on national security and pro-veteran, when in reality they have been exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite.
You talked about sort of the general reasons that the president gravitates towards these events. I don't think it should get lost in this conversation. This was his 80th birthday. Americans increasingly have concerns about his erratic behavior. Some of those folks tie that to his aging. Why do this for an 80th birthday?
Because he is terrified of his own mortality. He knows that he is declining physically, cognitively, and when strongmen whose personality cults tell us that they're omnipotent, they're macho, they are all-powerful, they're infallible. Mussolini had a slogan, Mussolini is always right, because he was into this too. And Trump appropriated a slogan that's similar, said Trump has always been right, Trump is always right, it's even on hats now. So what happens if they start to age, as we all do, and they're not as sharp anymore? Now, or they become ill, right? And in historic dictatorships like Mobutu, who had a brutal kleptocratic state, he got ill at the end, and he went abroad for treatment. He got cancer, I think. And while he was gone, he was overthrown. And he had to go into exile because the weakness, if you've been there for many years like Mobutu was, and the weakness has instilled hatred in people, they feel they've been victimized by him, then you showing vulnerability can be dangerous for you.